Hello, welcome back to the Transfer Flow, and on today's episode, we're talking about some of the best transfers of the season so far. We're looking at what Dean Huijsen has brought to Real Madrid, what Bournemouth did so brilliantly this summer, the striker ripping up Ligue, who could be destined for Chelsea, and Eintracht Frankfurt's Ekitike replacement. Then we look at Juventus making a managerial change. Luciano Spalletti looks like he's on his way in, but what makes him so great? What's unusual about him? And what challenges will he face with the Bianconeri? That's all on today's episode of the Transfer Flow. So we're back for another edition of the Transfer Flow. Joining me today is Hayden Van Brewer. How are you doing, Hayden?
I'm doing well, Patrick. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. We got a double recording today, you and I. We're going to talk over on this side about the best transfers of the season so far, the guys who we think have landed really, really well, and about Juventus making a managerial change. Wouldn't be Serie A without that happening early on. But then you and I are also recording the next episode of the Patreon podcast. And if people want access to that, you can head over to patreon.com/thetransferflow. If you sign up there at the $9 level, then you get access to our B-roll that comes out every week. You also get a whole podcast episode every single week, video podcast episode. If you use Spotify or something now, you will also see in your podcast app that you have a feed with all the free episodes and as well the locked ones. If you just click through on there, then you can connect your Spotify account to your Patreon, and that will give you easy access to the bonus episodes. Before we get into that, because I think over on that side, we're talking about how we could get Florian Wirtz firing for Liverpool, and also about how you break down deep blocks as defenses have become more organized. On the flip side, we're talking about guys who've landed really, really quickly, right, and found their feet at their new clubs. Hayden, before we get into the guys you've picked, I want to hear the guys who you rejected. Who did you consider bringing to this and decide against?
Yeah, well, I think looking through it, there's a lot of there's big signings. There's players that have teams have spent a lot of money on. I think guys like João Pedro would have been a hot topic coming into the summer out of the Club World Cup. Díaz to Bayern, Real Madrid splashing the cash for Dean Huijsen, who's one that I've really thought a lot about as sort of was a real area of need that got addressed in that team. Again, there's a number of players I think that maybe would catch the eye. A lot of players at City. Thierry Reinders obviously has come in to be a really important player for that team in terms of what they're trying to do. But I think for me, we talk a lot on this podcast about finding value, making smart moves repeatedly. And so, I wanted to talk about some of the teams that are maybe doing that well, teams that have players that play for teams that you and Neil have talked about as interesting teams to keep your eye on, and the types of moves that I think we would encourage teams to be doing as they're sort of progressing on this journey, and moves that have sort of panned out at least early on in the season. Again, there's still a long way to go. A lot of this value is about sort of the time of it and players improving and showing sustained value over time. But I really looked at players that were sort of in this range of what we would just almost unilaterally say, so far this has already been a really strong impact.
Sure. And there were guys who I've talked about elsewhere, and so I didn't want to bring them here today. I think Zubimendi is probably going to be in this conversation, especially it looks like Arsenal's defense has gone up to another level, and he feels as well like a guy who's meant to help them make this transition to a new style. But anytime you bring in a new signing and everything runs through that guy and it's going well, you kind of got to give credit for that. I also thought about bringing Robin Rufs here, who I think it was 10 million euros, something like that Sunderland paid for him. You'd have to argue, with them basically safe now on 17 points, and a lot of it, not all, but a big part of it down to his overperformance defensively. There are points that you can say they got because of him. To me, that's priceless, right?
Yeah, he's pretty straightforward as you'd almost say signing of the summer so far.
Yeah, sure.
If it keeps Sunderland out of the relegation zone, then it's priceless. It's almost one where it's we could just go and do the whole thing really on that, and that's sort of a strategy in terms of getting a goalkeeper signing, right? That we haven't really talked too much about, but there's huge value there, especially for these promoted teams that have to do so much defending, and his impact has just been massive. And yeah, I think a lot of teams will sort of see that and be like, wow, I didn't think there was such an edge to be had there. And it's just really well done by Sunderland to get in a player like that who has just done so well to start the season. I mean, just getting players comfortable. I think for me, going through this exercise, it is fascinating how many signings this summer, like, basically have not hit the ground running in the way that, like, a lot of these teams probably assume they will, just because they're like, we're spending
Yeah.
money, we're getting the guy that we really want. Like, we can go out and get whoever we want. And it's even those guys, it takes time to get comfortable, to get used to new teammates, to bed into a new system. And so, yeah, I love the idea. And I'm really excited to hear the players that you brought over Rufs or instead of Rufs, maybe, to sort of see, because, like, it was more challenging, I think, than you'd expect to really be like, yeah, that guy is a unilateral success. Two guys
Sure.
that I left off that I would say probably are in this category. One that's a little happier note, one that's a sad note. One is Díaz, has sort of been that, like, plug and play, hit the ground running. I think a lot
Unbelievable.
of that
Yeah.
has to do for the fact that, like, Harry Kane has so much gravity to him.
Mhm.
Bayern is such a behemoth in the Bundesliga, and he's sort of slotting right into a system and a role that just fits him really, really well. So I think there's, like, that was a very straightforward one. The other one is Kevin De Bruyne, who's actually started the season really well at Napoli and unfortunately injured himself while taking a penalty and scoring a penalty in his last game for Napoli. So, but he's actually done really, really well. It feels like Conte just gets these signings, these older guys can find the role for them, and he's been really effective. It's really sad to see him that he'll be sidelined for a couple months, but both of those are sort of senior pros that plug and play have fit really well. But I've gone with some other players here.
That's the De Bruyne experience, though, right? Like, when he plays, he's incredible. Sometimes I think when we talk about players declining, we get pushback from certain people, and I think what maybe sometimes people don't realize is there's decline where you look worse on the pitch, and there's decline where you're just on the pitch less. And for De Bruyne, it's been in that category, right? But he De Bruyne injuring himself while scoring a penalty remind me of was it DJ Khaled had an album called Suffering with Success, and I was like, yeah, that is Kevin De Bruyne, Suffering with Success.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've got a centre back today and a left back, actually. Who have you brought? I want to hear your first player.
So I've gone with two. I think one is one that you've talked about. You actually kind of shouted this one out in the summer. And it's Panacelli, the striker at Strasbourg.
Oh, I'm so glad because he was like he was my third choice that I didn't go for. I'm so excited to hear you talk about him.
Yeah, so I think, like, for me, this was a player that there could have been one that I left out and gone with something a bit different. And I think for me, I wanted to highlight this player because Strasbourg has started the season so incredibly well. And I think looking at that Strasbourg team, it's really easy to see, like, the rest of the group has the elements to keep the ball. Like, Liam Rosenior probably, maybe wrongfully at this point, lost his job at Hull for playing too, like, structured, secure, almost got called boring by the new ownership. And I think, like, it's clear to see how the rest of the group can do that. And it feels like Panacelli has sort of been the finishing touch, that he's that sort of, I don't know, a little bit what you think of as, like, a traditional center forward. Like, he likes to play on the last line. He's not necessarily like a only transition kind of guy. Like, he likes to make runs in the box to get on the ends of crosses. He doesn't really, like, come down off the line to, like, link up play and do that kind of thing, but he's like a safe pair of hands, I guess, so to speak, when you play him the ball. But really, he's looking to just be in and around the final third, get in on goal and get shots. And he's pretty creative about how he gets shots away. Like, I think that's one of the things that, like, when I kind of watch the player himself, is like, he feels like one of these NBA ball handlers who can just sort of, like, move, and even with people draped all over him, he can get shots away and really get some good contact. And I think that finishing touch has been what makes Strasbourg could have easily just been a team in the top half of Ligue who, like, don't really threaten Marseille, PSG, Monaco. That's like very easily where this team could have ended up. And it feels like, to me, with him, he has elevated them to a conversation where, like, they're gonna make things a little bit stressful for Blueco with what they're gonna do with European football and multi-club ownership, in the way that like Toulouse sort of did in the past with Luke Bourne's Redbird Group, right? So like that's really exciting and really cool, and it's a testament to the coach and the team. But Panacelli for me has been that like ceiling raiser piece who we sort of said at the start of the year he might need to be if they're going to lose Emega to Chelsea, and what's the plan here? And he really has been. Like he came from Alaves. Like it's not like this is a guy that dropped down a level or something like that. Like he's really taken on this role and this opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, last season he was on loan, right? In the Segunda División, and he got like 20 goals. And I guess they were expecting that they would have a year to blood him. And Emega's injuries have meant that in the end, he pretty much had to go straight in. Emega's still been pretty incredible when he's played. He just hasn't really played that much. But Panacelli has upped his shots. And we've got a guy now who's got 9 goals through the first 10 games of the season. And it isn't overperforming his expected goals and assists. I think he's right at like 9.7 expected goals and assists. That's including penalties, but still. And I mean, I laughed because I checked in on the raft of Ligue 1 games on Monday night, I think it was. And I was like, oh, how's Strasbourg doing? And I think it was 0-0 at halftime. And I clicked on Panacelli and it said he already had 1.2 expected goals in that game. And that's what's happening every time. He is just getting his shots, relentlessly getting his shots, relentlessly getting high value shots. I mean, what else stands out about him though? You know, he's obviously like the goal numbers will be enough for him to get attention. Like you say, he's not doing too much combination. His defensive numbers though look really solid, right?
Very active defender, like very energetic, a guy that sort of like will cover down, or will cover ground, will close people down, will get after the ball itself. Like, I think he adds that side of it. He adds the sort of playing on the last shoulder of the defender, looking to kind of get slipped in, and he has that sort of like looking to get involved in things with crosses. Like for a lot of teams, he's got you sort of feel like with strikers, like once they have sort of 2 different things to their game that they can contribute, then like that becomes enough. Like it's really hard to find these top guys that have everything. Your Harry Kane's, your Lewandowski's. Like it's such a rare profile of such a combination of athletic traits. It's such a combination of technical traits. It's really, really difficult. And so with Panacelli, you've got a guy who we go like, well, he's really just a handful in and around the box, creating shots, like making things happen there. And he's willing to put in a lot of work defensively and engage in kind of like whatever setup. Like you look at him and you could be like, yeah, this guy could press in a 4-4-2. Yeah, this guy could press in a 4-3-3 as the middle one on his own. You know, if we want to sit 4-5-1 and he's the guy that does that, no problem. If we actually had to play one of these weird setups where like, you know, where Sorloth is playing out wide in a defensive scheme and he's a striker out wide, we could actually probably do that with this guy. So he gives you a lot of flexibility defensively because of the work rate that he has there. If there's an element of his game that it's not his strength, now some of this I'm like, is a little bit just Strasbourg, but it's that he's not really the guy that's going to like come down, get off the line, turn, carry the ball. And that's where it's really interesting because like, as we're talking about him for Chelsea, I mean, again, as his agent will want us to know, like Nicholas Jackson was the player who was scoring the most goals for Chelsea and getting the most chances, and that's sort of an in-behind guy that's again also has a high work rate. And João Pedro is this off-the-line link-up player, almost number 10, playing as a, you know, not really a false 9, but kind of a false 9, very interesting profile. And that's not what Panacelli would be. Like he's not that kind of guy. He is a center forward and he can defend for you in a lot of different ways. But that's what he gives you. And that does allow you to, for a lot of teams, it allows you to be flexible defensively. And it's been really interesting, like hearing the sound bites from Liam Rossignol in terms of how the group manages itself. Like he gives a lot to the players. He gives a lot to the players in terms of like, how do we want to train? How are you guys feeling? Like really giving them a little bit of, that kind of approach. Like you hear that with the Warriors basketball team, Steve Kerr, and how he manages it. Like having guys like Steph Curry and Klay Thompson that are so senior and can manage the group when that team was really in its peak. he's sort of given a bit of that to a very young team, a team that's like on the other end of the spectrum in terms of experience. And I think Panacelli, in terms of a guy that offers you so much workload, but also like he offers you that workload defensively, which obviously teammates love, but teammates also love having an outlet of a guy where it's just like, if we get him the ball, we know we're going to get some goals here. Like,
Yeah.
if I'm having an off day, or the guy in front of me is just killing me, or I've got to play more defense today, I know that if we get this guy the ball, like, he's going to get something away. And I think like there's a balance in the group there that has just really, really struck in a great way.
Well, and I think as well, he's 23. He just turned 23. And, you know, that's by no means old, but like you can, sometimes you get a little bit less excited when a player is kind of at that age where they're making the leap than if they were putting these numbers up and they were like 21, right? But because he's not a dribbler, ball carrier type, a lot of the stuff that he does, there's no reason to think that it would decline as he gets older. In fact, players often get better at, you know, those little elbows, shoves, like backing into guys, finding space to get those high value shots. You know, we've talked about Guirassy doing that to a really high standard. So if Panacelli is already able to do that kind of stuff, consistently get these incredibly high value shots in the box at this age, then he could be a really, really special center forward, you know, by the time he's in his mid-20s.
He's not super reliant on his like speed or explosiveness.
No.
Which he's not a like, you don't look at him and go like, holy moly, this guy's just blowing dudes out of the water. Like, he's doing it with kind of cleverness and just like a bit of scrap. Like, he's just he's just a little bit of a fighter in the box, and you wouldn't want to play against him. And that's been a really great edge for the Strasbourg team, who does a lot of other things that look a bit nicer, sort of deeper in the pitch. Having that little nasty center forward who can get you shots and get you goals, it's been awesome.
Yeah, I love it, man. And yeah, it's the perfect example of like a smart transfer that's kind of working out for everybody. I've got another one of those, I think. So Adrien Truffert, the left back signed by Bournemouth this summer. To me, well, I'll start by saying this. Scouted Football, you know, which is a subscription I recommend, by the way. I subscribe to them. Sometimes feature contributions from our very own Neil Schiller. They produce these player archetypes, right, where they use statistical attributes to kind of categorize players. And if you don't subscribe to them, I would consider looking at that stuff, because especially if you're a football manager type, it's a kind of nice, intuitive way to understand why players do or don't work together, how teams try and balance skills. In their analysis, they said Bournemouth's move for Truffert to replace Kerkez was like for like. So the flyer profile, the fullback flyer profile. So that archetype for them is defined by this combination of high intensity actions, sprints, you know, and the frequency of underlapping and overlapping runs. So this is somebody who, these players are making runs in dangerous zones and probably at dangerous times. I guess I'm kind of using there, I guess, the intensity of those sprints as a proxy for there's an opportunity here that they've spotted, you know. And Truffert was a really solid stats target across the board. You know, he had his slightly fewer progressive carries than Kerkez, but historically very similar progressive passing, more progressive receptions. He was used to receiving high up the wing. Bournemouth got him for 13.5 million euros while shipping Kerkez out for like 46. They made a 33 million euro profit while getting in a player who's pretty much exactly 2 years older, but, you know, is still pre-peak or around coming into his peak, let's say. And I think as well, you know, he'd underproduced versus expected goals and assists last season. You know, Kerkez had 7 from 4.5 expected goals and assists, and Truffert had 4 from 5.5. So you maybe get a little bit of price wiggle room there as well, you know. But I just think that he was a cost-effective signing. He's a good age. He fits what they need that guy to do. And I mean, he's landed in exactly as you'd expect. You know, like, this is a guy who makes a load of tackles in the final third for a fullback. So he's used to pressing really high. He ranks very high for crosses into the penalty area. As a one-on-one defender, he's probably slightly better than Kerkez, better in the air, better at picking up loose balls. It's just a really good example of squad planning. And I think since he's arrived at Bournemouth, you know, we've seen those numbers shift slightly to what Iraola wants him to do, like less receiving up high, a bit more passing into the final third while improving accuracy. But he's also added more dribbling while getting dispossessed less. You know, like he's taking risks, but not losing the ball in a new league, which is pretty special. And when you look at Bournemouth this season, we all expected them to take a step back. They lost their 2 starting centre-backs and the starting left-back. And yet they've gone from 1.28 expected goals against per 90 to 1.23, from 12.7 shots against per 90 to 10.9. Now, don't get me wrong, I think that might well come down. Like they're quite thin. And obviously they had an injury crisis last season, and it was really the back half of the season their numbers slid a bit. But to maintain their defensive level, which looks like what they're going to do, that is pretty special stuff. And Truffert, I think, looks clearly among the superior left backs in the league. Like, he just immediately makes sense in that system. He does exactly what they need him to. If they wanted to resell him in a couple of years, he'd still be 25, and I'm sure they could for reasonable money. But if they don't, then they've got a starting Premier League quality fullback for a pittance, for something for what amounts to almost no money these days. And right now, like they're flying. I think because while we talk about players teams that have kept the group together through the summer and how that makes it a bit easier for them to hit the ground running. That's also true if you replace a player with somebody who's very like that player, right? You've got this guy in where everyone's like, well, we don't really have to adapt our games because he perfectly fits the hole that's been left.
Yeah, it's very similar to what we saw with like Cucurella leaving and immediately being replaced by Estupiñán.
Sure.
Where you're sort of wow, that was a really good signing. Like, could Chelsea have just gone for that guy? Like, wow, that's really cost effective, fits the team. Yeah, he's another player that's fit really well. Another player on the list of like just missed it, like Eli Krupi up top, wasn't technically a summer. I think he was technically a January that got loaned back to Lorient. But like he's a little bit small sample size before I wanted to like jump on the train there of being the difference maker, because Truffert has clearly been one of the key difference makers for Bournemouth on both sides of the ball so far. Yeah, and I think that's what's been really important and makes it like a great fit for Iraola. Like these guys that can be both sided, and it's been awesome to see how he's gotten so much out of Houston Clauvert. It's been great to see Tyler Adams, who was like injured, felt like for the whole first part of his Bournemouth career, and now has like really come in and been a great fit in the role in this very dynamic midfield. Totally agree. I think it's been an awesome start to the year for Bournemouth. They had a monster task replacing just players all over the field, especially in the back line though. Like for the team to be doing that well defensively with that much turnover is just really impressive. It's a testament to the coaching, and it's a testament to the whole group, because I think Ted shouted them out on the last podcast. This is the Black Knight group. Tim Bezbachenko is an ex-MLS executive who did awesome work, brought in Wilfred Nancy to Columbus Crew, had previously won with Toronto FC, like a successful in multiple, like in a lot of places he's been. Really smart guy, and it feels like a perfect match with Bournemouth, because with Bournemouth you're not in this super powered place. You have a little bit of time and flexibility out of the maybe spotlight to take some of these risks, and they're really getting them right. They're really doing good stuff right now, and Truffert is an excellent one there.
But you do kind of look, it does always make me think about what could have been in the 23-24 season for Rennes, because Truffert obviously came in from Rennes. That season, I thought Rennes were going to have a great year. They ended up finishing 10th. But that season, they had Truffert, they had Artur Theat, who's now at Frankfurt, they had Kalamuendo, who's now at Forest, they had Enzo Lefebvre, obviously at Sunderland, Desiree Doué, PSG, Gaëla Doué, now at Strasbourg. Plus, I mean, Guiri, who went off to Valencia, and Baptiste Santamaria, Guiri went to Marseille, Santa Maria went to Valencia. Like, there was so much talent in that squad, and Jérémy Jacquet as well, who's kind of like one of the next guys up, right? One of these young, exciting defenders. He was out on loan that season. So I always look at that squad and think, what if? But they were very smart then. But now it feels like you could pick up players from them. Who else have you got? Who else would you like to highlight here?
Yeah, so a lot of teams had to move attackers as sort of maybe dominoes sort of fell throughout big attacking teams in Europe. And no team needed to do that more than Eintracht Frankfurt, who lost sort of their entire offense between January and the summer. And sort of in return for these two excellent incredibly fun players in Omar Marmoush and Ugo Ekitike. Ekitike, who looks like Wembanyama on the soccer field with unbelievable ball handling, great size, sort of, a lot of interesting traits, the ability to run in transition. Marmoush, who is this sort of free, off the cuff winger 10 type, go wherever you want, pick up the ball deep, go on the last line, dynamic, explosive, who just sort of turned all of those tools into like goal output all of a sudden. They had this incredible attack, and they sold those guys. They made a lot of money, and then you've got to bring in other players. And Burkhardt has sort of been one of these players again at a sort of realistic price tag that has hit the ground running. He's not exactly the same as either of those guys. He's actually a bit more of like your kind of traditional Bundesliga center forward. Like, to some extent, he's really just he's really a guy that like covers ground. He'll engage the team defensively. He's like actually getting like a little bit like getting on the ball, like trying fewer passes and like doing less of the carrying that he was actually doing at Mainz, that I think actually is the things that like made him jump at Mainz and probably made Frankfurt interested, because Frankfurt is this team that usually goes for these like younger profiles, and he's a little bit more like peak age. I think he's 25 now. So it's a little bit of an unusual profile, and I think they were like, he athletically has so much of what we want in terms of the physicality, and he's got a lot of these ball handling things that like we probably saw not to the same extent as Ekitike, but has a lot of passing ability. And he hasn't totally shown that, but like he's a weapon in the box. He's been able to, really contribute there. He has enough, like, I would say he's not the same as Panacelli in terms of his defensive volume, but he's still of a sort of realistic contributor there. And he's started hot, whereas Panacelli's maybe closer to his XG. Burkhardt is over. He's over his XG, but like that is sort of the player that Frankfurt needed to hit the ground running, and again turn this huge lump sum, taking a quarter of the Ekitike transfer and turning it into a guy that's productive right away. That's what Frankfurt needs to also not be a team that drops off. And I think maybe that's a little bit of, if we're looking at this is the trend of guys that we're really excited about, are these guys that like, okay, teams can do sort of anything they want now. Teams that usually are really restricted. You can now do anything you want. Can you really still be smart? And we just talked about Bournemouth doing it. I think Frankfurt have done it here.
Yeah, I think this might work out better for Frankfurt purely because they've obviously made a bunch of money turning over their strikers, but because he's that bit older, they might keep him a bit longer.
Yeah.
It is interesting, what you're saying, because they've chopped off all these unnecessary bits of his game, or bits that are unnecessary. Like you say, he's not running the channels, which he was last year. He's not dribbling, which he's done historically. He's not really creating, which he's done historically. He's just focused on getting really high value shots. I mean, he's maintained his shot numbers from last season. Actually, this is a thing that I did see about Burkhardt. So I think last season his average shot distance was like 13, 14 yards from goal, and he was taking 3 shots a game, and he's still taking 3 shots a game. Do you know what his average distance from goal for his shots is now? It's 9.9 yards. So on average, his shots are closer than the penalty spot. It's absolutely unbelievable. Nice. I mean, really, being a striker, if you play any position other than striker at Frankfurt, you are going to have some humiliating days, I think. If you're a striker there, you often do get to look amazing. But he's clearly a smart player, and it'll be interesting to see if, when they pair him with different players, he plays in different ways. Because obviously last season when Marmoush went, the great thing about Ekitike was he was able to play really well in a 2 or by himself, at the tip of a kind of 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3. Like that kind of thing will be interesting to see whether Burkhardt, we see more of the dribbling as the season goes on if they need to play in different configurations.
Yeah, definitely. It's one that, like, the thing is, when we talk about can he do 2 things, like for me, yes, kind of the defending, but he does provide a little bit of that like off the line link up play. Like I think of him a little bit, and he's not, he doesn't sort of like strike the same. He feels like a bit more of a runner, but he's a little bit like Girassi light, like in the way that he kind of comes off the
Sure.
line,
Yeah.
and then he comes alive sort of like in the box as like a finisher in that sort of sense, which is like kind of a little bit surprising. Like I think it's a little bit one where I didn't totally see Frankfurt going that way. I thought they were going to continue to go for these guys that are unorthodox sort of. I mean, the Ekitike and Marmoush one are just like such unusual profiles, and they just kind of found their roles in this team. Whereas Burkhardt is a bit more sort of traditional, right? But I think it's been a good fit. I really do like the idea that like he could actually stick around for a couple of seasons. That it's not just going to be a one and done. He comes in, plays for a year, 50, 60 million the next summer. That he might actually be there, which would allow him to form these partnerships and link up. And just like, again, I mean, I don't want to count Frankfurt out this year. They're one of the teams that I sort of said at the start of the Champions League when we were talking about predictions. You asked me for a dark horse, and I forget who I was talking about. And then I had the list of teams in front of me, and I was like, oh my God, I didn't say Frankfurt. I should have said Frankfurt. Like, if any team's going to get it right in a way I don't expect, I think it's going to be them. If Burkhardt can continue to perform in the way that he's doing, but not just like perform because he's scoring goals. Like even if his finishing output drops off, but he finds this sort of comfortability in the team, they're a team that could really do something this year and possibly build for another year after that, which would be awesome.
Yeah, I would love to see it. They have been certainly entertaining so far this season. Not consistent, but entertaining. I'm going to wrap up with like an obvious one. You mentioned him earlier, but I think Dean Huijsen deserves some notice here. You know, when Real Madrid were interested in Leny Yoro before, and then the price got too high and they decided, okay, we're going to keep our powder dry. They must look at this signing now and think, thank God we did. Like, which is not to criticize Yoro, but they got a guy who is Spanish, Dutch Spanish, but Spanish, has come into the team and has looked basically perfect immediately for what they want to do. I mean, everyone's passing numbers look great under Alonso, but Huijsen currently is passing like one of the best centre backs in the world. You know, those are the numbers we're seeing out of him. Like, he's upped his passes per 90 by a third, but he's also improved accuracy by a lot. He's completing 9 out of 12 long balls a game. He's completing 9 passes into the final third. Like, he is a key ball progressor for them, which I expected him to be a useful passer for them, but I didn't really think that he'd have that much responsibility. But he's leading the team in passes into the final third. And he's less engaged defensively. You know, like he's doing less, but what he's doing is very, very effective. And he's winning every aerial duel that comes his way. Like, he's at nearly 80% aerial win rate. So all these stuff, all these numbers, I think what they really show is that he's got this combination of passing, of ground cover, of defensive instincts and aerial prowess that allows Alonso to play the game he wants. And Real are now able to push up and box people in and trust that Huijsen a lot of the time is going to be able to cover all that ground in behind. But as time goes on, especially in the Champions League, and given as well, I think that Alonso is conservative in lots of ways, they probably are going to need to drop deeper and defend their box at times. And I look at Huijsen and I think, yeah, he's the guy that I would trust to do that. Like, he has the ability to defend his box in a kind of traditional way, right? Go and make challenges at the right time, hold the shape, win aerial duels. Like, he can do that. And he's 20. Like, there are only, across Europe's top 5 leagues, there are 4 under 21 centre-backs that have as many minutes as him. And he's the only one of those who's at a top club. He's actually younger than Nico O'Reilly at Man City, who obviously everyone's like, oh, what an interesting prospect. Dean Huijsen's younger than him. He's playing for Real Madrid. He's a week older than Kobbie Mainoo, who, yeah, we're still like, oh, what shape is Kobbie Mainoo's career going to take? Dean Huijsen is already kind of looking like a world-class centre-back. And what was it, 60 million euros, something like that? It's a lot of money, but that's kind of the going rate for a centre-back now. And for a guy who they were signing at 19, it's pretty staggering stuff. So I don't think Real Madrid are perfect or anything, but I think they're the favourites for the Spanish title, because they've got their shit together more than Barcelona right now. They're certainly contenders in the Champions League. And when I look around the signings, okay, Carreras is an important one. But actually, like, the signing they made this summer that was absolutely necessary. They needed to get at least one top quality centre back, and Huijsen was that. And I think it's kind of perfect for them.
Yeah. Breaks my heart that he's not playing for the Netherlands.
Sure,
It breaks my
agreed.
heart that he, in his first game against the Netherlands, he was a part of the Spanish team that won in the beautiful Amsterdam Arena.
That's the one position where the Netherlands has at least been like
Stacked.
fairly stacked. Like,
So stacked.
like
yeah.
That's not where that it would be great, but he's not
So
the
stacked,
guy you need.
but he would probably start.
Oh, sure.
Right now,
yeah.
I think Timber is basically starting in that role besides Van Dijk,
Sure.
with Van de Ven as left fullback, and then a flyer at right back or something like that with Dumfries Frimpong doesn't really play right back for the national team. Anyways, yeah. I'm just going to say a bunch of nice things about Dean Huijsen because he's come into this Real Madrid team from Bournemouth, of all places. Incredible. He's come to this Real Madrid team, and it feels like if they play back three, if they play back four, if they play teams that sit in against them and they have the ball, if they play teams that high press them and pin them back, he is the guy that will be in that lineup no matter what. Like, you might change Rudiger for Alaba, for Militao, but it will always be Huijsen in there. Like, he is in that lineup no matter what. He is like this unbelievable combination of like flexibility and intelligence to play these different setups while also like not being fazed by the Real Madrid thing. I don't know if that's because he was like in this Juventus next gen, like whatever that sort of nexus was of player development, where he's just like kind of had a bit of a spotlight on him, but wasn't really under a ton of pressure. And then has just like, as he got the opportunity at Bournemouth, he sort of like had the sort of personality or temperament to really handle this step up to Real Madrid. Cause he's sort of just come in the way that, like, you know, I think everyone was like, Jude Bellingham to Real Madrid, he's an awesome player. It's a big jump. It's a lot of money. And then he was like better than you could have ever believed, you know, scoring all those goals and doing all that. Like, Dean Huijsen has basically done that. Like, he's just come in and he's been fantastic. You kind of can't imagine that this team without him would be able to do all the things that Xabi Alonso wants in terms of like pressing higher up the field, engaging, like taking more sort of risks and build up and playing more with the ball. Like, it feels like he has been super instrumental to that. And yeah, he will be I expect him to just be like a Real Madrid lifer who like Real Madrid fans never learn how to pronounce his name, but like he's just incredible and becomes a stalwart for the Spanish national team. He's fantastic, and it's been awesome to see. And I can't say I'm like super surprised because he was so good for Bournemouth last year. Like, it was like they were part of this back line that was like so good to watch the whole season. And so I think it's like not surprised. It's surprising that it's not surprising. Which is a weird thing to say, but have only good things to say about the player.
When we were previewing El Clasico last week, we were just like, oh, well, one problem for Real Madrid might be if Dean Huijsen isn't available. And it's just like, it should be unthinkable to say that about a 20-year-old centre-back, but
Right.
That's where we are. Okay, I think that wraps our conversation on some of the best signings of the season so far. Obviously, it's something we will continue to check in on as the year goes on. We wanted to talk about a big managerial change, though, because Juventus have got rid of Igor Tudor and they are hiring, supposedly, Luciano Spalletti. Supposedly, he's agreed to a deal. I think it's meant to be till the end of the season, and if he makes Champions League, it automatically renews for a couple of years. Supposedly, he said, I need 30 months to do this. Like, I need to make sure that I'm going to have the time. I think you and I were both kind of pumped about this, right? Because Spalletti is like, if you ask who are the fun coaches in the world, who play like good, enjoyable, exciting football, Spalletti is right up there, right? And we both kind of had him earmarked as a replacement for managers in the Premier League that we have question marks around. I was like, if Hutzler went, do you think about Spalletti? You had him for Chelsea, right?
Yeah, in this fun and good matrix, I think it's good to put both, because I think
so few people there.
I was gonna throw out a name that would trigger our friend Nikos in terms of like, Peter Bos is a lot of fun. Should Peter Bos get the Chelsea or Juventus job? Probably not. Like, he's got a lot of awesome things. It's very, very fun. Is it going to be successful? It needs specific circumstances. Sure. Spalletti is really one of the guys in that sort of combination where he it feels like he teaches players really improve under him. They understand the game better. He's got flexible tactics that can play in different ways. He adapts to the players that he has. Like we talk about sort of, I don't know. I think like for a while, teams sort of really talked about like system and structure, and we want a coach that just really knows how to coach their own, the way they do it. And they're so good at it. Like, I think that was really a push. And now we sort of have had a little bit of a pushback, like how pragmatic and flexible can a coach be? Can they work with different groups of players? Could they, change what they're doing based on the competition they're in and that kind of thing? And it feels like Spalletti is a guy that can do a lot of that, that wants to have a team that controls the ball, that he's an Italian coach, but really the part of his game that he enjoys the most is this sort of like attacking side of it and finding ways to be creative in it. I liked him as sort of an alternative for Chelsea at the time. When obviously they went out and brought in Maresca, it looked like they were looking sort of domestically more so maybe at the time. But I thought Spalletti was a guy that could have been successful with the group of players they have, a lot of sort of flexibility. And when I look at Spalletti, and this is sort of what the direction I want to go here a little bit, is that like, for me, I think his success at Juventus is going to be determined on how he gets the midfield right. Because Juventus's midfield
Agreed.
is tricky because they've got like Thuram and Locatelli and Weston McKennie, and they've got like Yildiz is kind of in there,
Cope
and
Miners.
and every one of these guys is what you'd be like, he's kind of an 8. He's not really a 6. Yildiz is more of a 10, but like Yildiz also plays more as this sort of like either second striker, or if they play with 2 6s and two 10s,
sure,
he's one of those. So it's a little bit different, but like a lot of 8s, and they're going to need to sort this balance out. That's going to be on Spalletti. My one thing, and this was like a thought I had walking the dog the other day, was like, Spalletti would, in the same way that we talked about like Glasner being a good fit to come in if United moved on from Amorim because they've changed so much to be a back 3 and taking with what they've got. Spalletti might have been a really good fit to come in after Motta if they wanted to still keep this sort of back 4. They went and signed Zagrova and players like that who are still kind of winger shaped. Like, Spalletti is this Italian manager who has predominantly played with back 4s and then sort of like flexible midfield shapes and different attacking setups in that regard. Yeah. And so I don't know how that's exactly going to play, because sort of in the interim, Juventus beat Udinese and still continued to sort of play this back 3 shape. So I don't know, are they going to stick with it or are they going to make adjustments here? That's sort of the big question. But for me, it feels like, what does Spalletti do with the midfield? That will determine if he's successful or not with Juventus.
I think that's probably true. There's a lot of work that the midfield has to go through under him. And, actually, we're going to talk about kind of a related topic on the Patreon, right? Because I think what makes Spalletti, where we're talking about breaking down low blocks, because I think what makes Spalletti fun is that his teams are structured, but they're less programmatic than like an Antonio Conte team, right? So when a player receives the ball in a Conte side, it's like, I know where my teammate is and I know the thing that I'm meant to do now. And if I don't do it, I get dropped and Conte goes berserk. Like, he did this whole thing with Basuma, right? And then he kind of liked, was it Winks he was playing for a minute or somebody, or Skip or someone? It was one of those guys he was playing when he was at Spurs because they just did what he told them to do. And like, Conte is a great manager, but like Spalletti, it seems like players know where their teammates are going to be in the structure, but they have more options about what they can do. Like Spalletti gives them a little bit more freedom. But when they defend, you do see them press really high, and you see them overload one side. They're really happy to do that to try and squeeze the ball. But obviously that means that if teams can play out, the central midfielders have lots of ground to cover. Quick switches mean lots of ground to cover. And I've got in my notes here as well, I was like, Locatelli, Cope Miners, Thuram, like maybe those guys are going to have to work pretty hard. But I think as a 3, I think they probably, like, Locatelli and Cope Miners probably do enough defensively that it gives you what you need. Like this was a guy as well who used Lobotka as the 6 at Napoli, and we love Lobotka, but Lobotka's special not because he goes through a ton of defensive work, really, right? Like he's never really done that. I think Thuram might actually benefit as well if he's allowed to make those runs into the half spaces and into the box in the way that we saw from Anguissa when he was playing at Napoli. And I can't remember who was in midfield for him at Roma, but I loved that 2016-17 Roma side. I think Yildiz, Conceição, at least one of the strikers will have fun because Spalletti teams are really good at getting those wingers in positions to run one-on-one at their fullback. And I think the question there is like, who is he going to prefer up front? Like, obviously he's got Vlahovic, he's got Openda, he's got Jonathan David, who maybe could also play in the hole if he wants to try that. He's used various different kinds of strikers before. Like, so, you know, Vlahovic is maybe a bit more in the mold of like when he used Dzeko at Roma. Openda in some ways is, I mean, he's not the physical presence, but in some ways he's not dissimilar to like Osimhen at Napoli, where he was expected to run the channels and like basically get a ton of shots in the box. I really don't know what he's going to go for there, but I think if he gets time, it will be good, and some of those young players I think will really explode under him. What's interesting to me is how things change as the league has moved more towards him and Gasperini. You know, like when he and Gasperini were not first making waves, you know, Spalletti's been around a long time, but in the mid 2010s, when those guys were really kind of like getting a lot of attention, it felt like they were outliers in Serie A. And now it's interesting that you look at the pressing numbers and things in Serie A, and the league is much more like Gasperini and Spalletti. And someone like Allegri, like his Milan side, are the most defensively like passive side in Serie A this season, and they're really unusual. So it does kind of feel like he and Gasperini won like the ideological war, but I don't know if that means there might be diminishing returns for the kind of tactical systems as time goes on. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not totally positive. This Juventus team, again, it feels like it's not totally shaped to one style or to one formation yet. And there's going to be a lot of like front office work that needs to happen. But like that's what Juventus is. Like they are a lot of work, but they also have a lot of resource, and there are good players in this team. And it's just like, I just feel like it's a balance of getting this midfield right. And they don't necessarily have the midfield sort of passing controller in there, and they don't necessarily have the midfield profile of like a out and out destroyer, but they do have guys that can carry the ball. They do have guys that can sort of contribute in different areas. They just have they've got a lot of eights, and I'm super excited to see what happens though. Like I will say, this is a move where I look at this and I'm like, you know, Juventus, they might be on the longtime Patrick hate list, but they might turn into must-watch TV in Serie A, which is, we've sort of said all year. We said it before the season, most exciting league. We would say it now. It's still the most exciting league in terms of like competition, variety of styles, lots of good players, and this like makes it even more exciting for me. I definitely think there's questions to ask. Like I don't feel like Tudor was necessarily like set up to succeed long term. And like I said, maybe just a little bit ago, like maybe Spalletti would have been a guy that was a better fit to come in at that time. Obviously he was still with Italy, so it wasn't like a direct, he wasn't like available at the time necessarily, but it's a big opportunity. And yeah, I kind of hope it goes well, but I think at the very least it will probably be pretty fun.
Yeah, and that would be a change at Juventus. Like, I mean, except for the Sarri experiment, they've never really tried a manager who's fun. It just goes against everything they stand for. What they stand for is misery and crime. Like those are the things that they're into. So I'm really excited to see this. I hope that he makes it there. He's an interesting coach, man, because like Spalletti's always old. Spalletti's older than you think, right? He's been around for a really, really long time. And yet I still think that he's one of the few managers of his type that I think has really coached at an elite level. Yeah, like I think that there are loads of guys, kind of like you say, there are loads of guys who are in the fun quadrant, but not in the good quadrant. And he, I would love to see him succeed, even if it is with Juventus. I think that wraps us for today. Thank you very much for being here. And thank you, Hayden, for being here too. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, I'm H. Van Brewer on Blue Sky.
Excellent. And if people want to hear more of us talking about Wirtz and how to break down low blocks in the modern game, then you can sign up for the Patreon. We'll put the link on screen. Please do submit your questions. We're going to be answering them over there. In fact, the Wirtz one was a question sent in by a listener. We really do appreciate you. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app, and we'll catch you next week. Bye-bye.